All right. So we've been talking about RESTful APIs, and so I'm going to talk about one. I'm going to the whole notion of RESTful APIs is so that folks that might have data that was perhaps internal to their infrastructure, internal to their business, that represents some of their business processes, that they have found more that the data has even more value if they share that data and perhaps integrate it with somebody else's data, right? That more data and aggregated and meshed into by others can certainly add value to your own data. So one of my favorite APIs that's out there is that I also use in my other courses is the omdb API. omdb is an API that gives access to their movie databases that you can get poster information and plot and from IMDb. Okay? It used to be free. Now you have to become a patron to pay for it, but it's about $1 a month, so it's fine. And I don't know if I have my key. I think I have my key somewhere in an email. So it's fairly easy to use. Here they give you here several ways to search for movies or series or episodes, and you can ask it whether in JSON. You can ask for it by a title or by the IMDb if you have the IMDb ID. And so let's see an example. So there it is. So here's an example where S means I want to do a search string. In this case, it's the title of a movie, and the API key is you either it's a key that they email you once you've paid. There's my key. Don't use my key. And it comes back to you. In this particular case, they decided to share the data in JSON format. And it has some metadata about how many total responses there are. So there's 336 movies that match your criteria, and also they're only showing the first 10. Right? And this is a summarized version of the response, only showing the first 10. But you can certainly ask for more. Right? You can paginate and ask for the next 10, next 10, next 10, and ask for more data. And this is summarizing that they don't give you all the data. They only give you enough to perhaps display in a summarized view. The title of the movie, the year, the IMDb, whether this is a movie, TV series, or whatnot. And then the poster. The poster can be used to access art or poster information. As an image, as a JPEG, and enough for you to be able to provide a summarized result set. Okay, they have additional versions of this that if you give them the ID, right, they can give you a further information about that one particular movie. So you can say meaning the ID. I'm going to give you an ID, and they can give you a much more thorough information about that one particular object. Right? In this case is Batman Begins, a year, rated, release, Rotten Tomatoes, genre, director, actors, plot, ratings from different outlets, Metascore. So a more detailed information about that one particular object. And this is very common across all APIs that you might find out there. Right? They'll give you an API that will give you a summarized list of the result set that matches a particular criteria, and then they'll also give you an ID if you want to know more about any one of those articles or a sports team or events occurring around town, recipes, whatever, right? Or locations around you, and they might first give you a summarized version of it, and then you can do an additional call to retrieve information about that particular object. Make sense?
There goes my ability to win at every trivia contest.
Jury concept? Yeah, no. With Watson, it's nothing. I saw the other day Watson being able to argue in favor and against any topic. You give it any topic, and they give you 3 reasons why you're right and 3 reasons why you're wrong, which is pretty cool. Great for debates, debate teams.
How Skynet is created, you know this, right?
Skynet? No. It'll save us from ourselves. All right, so let's see if we can integrate with this API using, well, in this case let's consider Java. All right, so I've made available these slides that will walk you through integrating really with any API, but in particular it's giving this as an example. First, you'll need to get a key of your own from omdb. So let's create a client that connects to this. So this is a web service client. I'm using this particular client, but this could be used for anybody. So if you want to use Google or Yelp or Amazon or whatever, you'll need to know what the API URLs are, right? In this case, I'm using omdb. So let's build something. Let's see. Let's bring up Eclipse. Yes, maybe. It's been a while. And let's see. Let's add here in lectures. Let's see what we have here. Java resources. What do we play around here? We played around with DOM, JackSpeed, XSLT, DAO. Okay. All right. So let's play around with web services. So let's create a package where we can play around with omdb. So let's create here a new class inside of this package, and this will be the omdb web service client, and with a main. So once we're in there, we're going to start adding some constants such as the URL to your particular API. In this case, we are going to omdb. First, let's create a generic capability of being able to just send a GET request from this web service. So somebody went through the trouble of providing an endpoint, a web service endpoint, right, that we can connect to and then retrieve that data. In this particular case, this is the endpoint, right? This is the URL, right? And this is the URL pattern that they're listening, and they're parsing out the query and then just running some code in the background, which is accessing their own databases, right? We will implement this ourselves in a minute, right? First, we'll create a client, right, that will go out to their services, and then ourselves, we're going to turn around and create our own web service, right, that we could also host ourselves, okay? And somebody who might find our information interesting could use our endpoint. Okay. So let's first create a send GET request. So this is going to be a generic function that will allow us to generate any request, any GET request. Okay, so it's this is the request that's going to come back from these folks is just going to be a plain old string. Right now, my browser, I have a plugin that parses this into JSON. It understands that it's JSON and pre-prints it so I can look at it. But really, this is what's coming back from the server. Right? It's just plain old text. Right? Just ASCII, a whole bunch of curly brackets, quotations, right? Commas, and a whole bunch of ASCII code. Okay. So this is what we're going to be getting back. Right? Just raw text. So I'm gonna use a string buffer that's just gonna buffer all in and just gonna concatenate it all in there. So we're going to create a URL that's going to be passed in as an argument. Okay, And this throws an exception, so we're going to handle it in here. So we're going to just put it, we're going to import first, java.net. And creating the URL throws an exception, so I'm just going to surround it with a try catch. And then I'm going to open up a connection to that URL, right, using the HTTP URL connection, which we need to load. And this also throws an exception, so I'm going to add a catch clause to the surrounding try. There it is, an IO exception. We're then going to configure what is it that we want to do. Do we want to do a post? Do we want to put a put, a delete, a get? What is it that we want to do? In this case, we are reading, right? Here, when you type something at the URL at the browser, if you inspect the communication between our browser and the server where this is going, if I refresh, you'll notice that it's generating a get, right? If you inspect the communication, you notice that it is generating a get, right, and to that particular URL, right? So we're gonna configure this to be a get. Let's grab a get. So we'll configure the connection to be a get. We'll also configure that we are going to accept really anything, right? Just, I don't care what the MIME type is. I know that it's going to come back as just plain old text. I could here configure it to only accept text, but no, I'm just going to accept whatever MIME type you want to send me. I'll just parse it on my side. Now what comes back might be encoded. There might be spaces, right? There might be some characters, UTF characters. There are that I like to convert into just plain old ASCII. So once we've set up and configured that, we can then start reading into our buffer. So this is going to create an input stream. That input stream, let's load it. Let's import it from Java IO. That input stream we're gonna use it into a buffer, which we're gonna pass it to be able to read it byte by byte, right, and just concatenate it to our local data as a plain old string. So once we have the reader all set up, we can start reading from it and encode it and concatenate it into a local string. Yeah, so there we go. So this is a line we're going to read line by line. Once it reaches the end, right, we're just going to keep we're going to stop, right, and going to concatenate it into this buffer, right. Once we have the buffer, we're going to convert it, and we're going to convert it into a string down here. Okay. All right, so there we have a very generic get request, right. We just give it the URL. It's going to post it. It's going to send it as a get, and whatever comes back is going to just return it as a plain old string. Okay, so let's try it out. Let's try it out. Here's the URL that we're going to be using with your own API key. So this is basically the same string that we use to type it at the browser. Where we're going to put a placeholder for the title of the movie and a placeholder for the API key. My API key is not this one. I'm just going to paste it in there. Okay, don't use my API key. And so now we can just write a little function that uses our request, right? Our generic get request, and just passes arguments to it, right? So we can write here a function that can take as argument the title of a movie, the key that we're going to pass it as an argument. Well, I guess we can pass it as an argument. So let me put that there. And it's going to replace the title and the API key with whatever I pass it, right? And it's going to use it as a request, going to send it to our generic send get request, right? And then it will come back with just a plain old string. So let's do that. Let's from main use it. Use main. So what we're doing here is that we are using our search movie by title and passing just Batman, right? And get your own key. It's right here. Let me copy that. And we'll just print out the JSON to the console. Right, so let's run that as a standalone Java application. And there it is. It's basically the same thing that we had earlier, right? From the browser, but now we have it at the console. Right? What we need to be able to do is parse this JSON somehow, right? If we want to use it. But if we must, we can just use an online JSON editor just to verify that indeed the data came back formatted correctly, right? And we just convert it into an object representation. Indeed, we have the data in there. Okay, so it's perfectly fine, that data. All right, so we can then implement the next one is that if we do have an ID of one of these objects, we can then ask for more information about that one particular instance. Okay, so let's do that. Let's add to this an additional query that allows us to retrieve it by IMDb. So let's add that. Right. A search by IMDb URL, which is basically the same thing. The only difference is that instead of using S, we're using the query parameter I equal and then the IMDb API, IMDb ID that we want to pass as an argument, and the same API key that we need to pass every time. So once we have that, we can then implement a search movie by ID by IMDb, right? That does basically the same thing. It it takes as argument an IMDb string and the key, and then it encodes it encodes. Wait, why the title? No, this one doesn't go here. This one goes over here. Yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention here that the title, right? The title that you send, right? This one worked because Batman is a single word, right? But if you use something else like Star Trek, Star Wars, whatever, right, that you have a space in between, that needs to be encoded in whatever protocol you're using, right? That it encodes it in a universal mechanism that everybody understands that this is a space, right? So we're using an encoder, the URL encoder, which is another class. We're going to load it. This is in JavaNet. It encodes it in UTF-8, so lose like %20 or something, whatever the ASCII that needs to be converted into hexadecimal code for that character. Okay. This throws an exception, so I guess let's put it inside of the try catch. And now the title is okay. Now it worked also with movies that might have a space in their title. So let me fix that. So this URL encoder is actually move from here. It's actually here. It needs to be here. Title. There we go. So in this one we have the IMDb. Let's take a look at one of the movies. Let's grab maybe this one right here, which is I think Batman Begins. And let's use our brand new URL, our new query, that instead of searching for a list of movies, we'll search for a particular movie with a particular IMDb. In this particular case is the IMDb ID we'll grab that, let's copy that. And let's pass in that IMDb and the same API key, and we'll print out the JSON, the second JSON. So let's copy and paste this system. There we go. So let's run it now. IMDb by title. Oops, did I use the wrong URL? I did use the wrong URL, didn't I? It's this one over here. Substitute IMDb with IMDb key and then the key. All right, let's run it again. Okay, there we go. So the first one is the first call, right? That just lists the summaries. Whereas the second one is specifically for that one movie that we sent, right? So if we copy that, we can take a look at it in our JSON editor. We can paste it in there. format it and see that indeed is information about that one movie, right? And we can convert it into an object representation that you can see all the content: writers, actors, plot, language, posters, and whatnot. Make sense? All right, awesome.
Are you gonna resave and repost that one?
Post. What do you mean?
The integrating to omdb website?
Yeah, it's right here. What do you mean?
The PowerPoint.
Yeah, it is available.
Where?
Oh.
It's not.
Okay. No. All right. Sorry. No, it's not. It's not in the. I will make it available. Yes.
I think it's in the web services class, but not in this one.
Yeah. No. It's actually no. I don't use this in the web services class. So let me. Actually, I can post it right in Piazza right now, so you can look at it. You can follow along.
I think that's why people were furiously typing, trying to keep up.
5200. No, please. All this will be available. So let's see. This is slides. Might be useful for the project. Okay. So we tried it. So we tried it from the command line. We ran it and so what we'd like to be able to do now is that now that we have this access to a remote service, we'd like to be able to create our own service, right? Perhaps with our own schema, right? That might make it perhaps more restful. Notice that their implementation is not very restful, right? It's using these query parameters, which is not very restful. It's not following the some of the standard representations of the way we organize RESTful APIs. So let's create our own, right? Let's create our own.